The U.S. House of Representatives impeachment probe will begin its first public hearing next week as the drumbeat to impeach the president grows louder. My first guest is an attorney and a New York Times best-selling author. His latest book, Guilty by Reason of Insanity, is just out. Here to talk about what's next in the impeachment inquiry and the new book, I'm joined by David Limbaugh from his home state of Missouri. David, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Raymond. Thanks for having me on.
I want to start with this ongoing impeachment inquiry of President Trump about an alleged quid pro quo with Ukraine. Now, all this goes back to a call the president had with the president of Ukraine. Now, in exchange for investigations, it's alleged, that would benefit Trump politically, he said, look, I need a favor here. On Tuesday, it was revealed that by the U.S. ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, that he updated his testimony to say that a top Ukrainian official told him the following. I said that resumption of the U.S. aid would likely not occur until Ukraine provided an anti-corruption statement. Sondland admits that, quote, I did not know and still do not know when, why, or by whom the aid was suspended. I presumed the aid suspension had been linked to the proposed anti-corruption statement. Now, Democrats, David, were quick to hail this as proof of a quid pro quo that they've been alleging all along. Is this enough to impeach the president?
It's not even enough for a censure. I mean, we talk about high crimes and misdemeanors. This, even if what they say is true, it's not a high crime and misdemeanor. Trump was asking if he did this at all in the sense they're talking about. He was asking out of frustration that Biden be investigated. He's so sick of Democrats orchestrating this coup against him. He says, look, why don't you start investigating their real corruption, their real coup against me? If he thought he was doing something improper, do you think he would have done it transparently like he always does, speaking off the cuff in front of perhaps as many as 12 people that could have heard him? There was nothing sinister in his intent, and there was no movement on the part of the Ukrainians. And this Sondland guy, as you said, presumed his intent or presumed what he was up to. This is very thin stuff, not impeachable.
Well, David, isn't it true, and just to clarify for the audience, what the definition of high crimes and misdemeanors is really relies on whatever the House majority believes it to be, correct?
There's no question that as a practical matter, that's what it is. Now, I think in English common law, it had a meaning, and it involved either criminal activity or something involving an egregious abuse of power. But as you say, even though that was a common law precedent, as a practical matter, impeachment is political in the United States, and it's shaped up that way too. But if you notice, Nancy Pelosi said she did not want it to be overtly political. She did not want it to be one house doing it, one party doing it. It had to be bipartisan, and she's betrayed her own earlier assertion. It is not bipartisan. The only bipartisanship is against this process.
Sondland apparently never said he was told by the president that there was a quid pro quo. And in fact, during his original testimony in October, he said this regarding the conversation with the president, President Trump. I asked him one open-ended question. What do you want from Ukraine? He said, I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. I want Zelensky to do the right thing. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, I want him to do what he ran on. Now, does this back and forth regarding a quid pro quo, does this help the president?
I don't see how it can help but help him. I mean, they don't have anything they're grasping, and that is an affirmative negation, an express negation of a quid pro quo. Why isn't more being made of that?
I want to move on. On Wednesday, the Democrats released testimony of a top U.S. envoy to the Ukraine, Bill Taylor. Again, according to Democrats, because this was private testimony, this testimony, Taylor's testimony, suggests a quid pro quo. But in reading the transcript, David, which I have, it does not appear to be so. In one exchange between GOP Representative Lee Zeldin and Taylor, Taylor was asked if he had firsthand knowledge of Trump conditioning an investigation into the 2016 election and the Bidens on military aid. Taylor says this, what I know is what Ambassador Sondland was able to tell me about these investigations and Ambassador Volker. I don't know what was in the president's mind. Even if a quid pro quo is found, does this rise to the level of impeachment? Again, David.
No, there is no way it rises to that level, and other people have made that argument, and the Democrats know this. They planned this in advance. They tried to get him on the Russia hoax. It failed after they promised they had direct evidence, and they lied. They've never been held to account. Schiff has never been held to account for promising and failing to produce objective evidence of collusion. And now we have them shifting, pivoting to Ukraine. They don't have anything. They planned it from the beginning, and they're just trying to pile up now a process crime on Ukraine, trying to get Trump for obstruction or abuse of power. There's nothing there. It's almost embarrassing, to be honest with you. You may say you don't like the fact that he did it, but impeachable, give me a break. No way.
Former National Security Advisor John Bolton refused to testify to this committee. The House Democrats rescinded the subpoena because they don't want to get tied up in a court battle with the White House. But what they said today, Adam Schiff came out and said, this is evidence of the administration obstructing justice. Your take on that?
To properly assert executive privilege is not, by definition, an obstruction of justice. If you have a legitimate assertion of executive privilege, you're not obstructing justice. You're availing yourself of your constitutional prerogatives. Now, if he's doing it wrongly and abusing his power doing it, trying to keep Bolton from talking, you can inquire into that. But to say merely the assertion of executive privilege when the president has a right, in fact, a duty, Mark Levin used to argue that during the Clinton impeachment, you don't want to denigrate the president's executive authority and undermine it and let the Congress just run roughshod over the executive branch if it's not warranted.
I want to move on to a political analysis here. It seems the House Democrats are placing an awful lot of capital on this impeachment inquiry and in this impeachment cause. Is that wise on the less than a year from an election? Is it wise to try to eradicate the last election, vacate it in the midst of a new one?
You know, they've not, they're in their own echo chamber, and I don't think they have a clue what goes on in middle America. They ought to tune in to a Trump rally and see the unprecedented enthusiasm, people's outrage at these overreaches. I do not think it's wise. I think the polling shows that their efforts at impeachment, their own power grabs, are backfiring, and people are beginning to say this is an abuse of power, and they can't be entrusted with the presidency and the Congress, the majority of both houses, if they're going to continue to devote their entire legislative agenda to undermining this elected president. They will have, if this continues, have tried to oust a president for 4 full years. This has never happened. They have ignored any legislative agenda. They've lost all credibility that they care about passing legislation in furtherance of their own policy agenda, which is utterly bankrupt. They're reduced to identity politics and advocating socialism and spending the people's money in unsustainable environmental and health care programs.
I'm amazed at the polling. I mean, in the last 3 weeks, you see a 7-point shift against impeachment, which you would imagine would move in the other direction given all the media attention, but it doesn't seem to be, moving in the impeachment direction, at least among the people. I got to get to your book before we run out of time. Right. In your new book, Guilty by Reason of Insanity, you discuss, David, the political discourse changing in recent years. How has it changed, and how do we get civil discourse back in this country, given what we've been talking about the last 10 minutes or so?
Well, it used to be that the people would say that the parties have the same goals, just to have different ideas about how to get there.
Right.
We no longer share the same goals. They want abortion on demand, killing babies up to the point of birth and beyond. They want open borders, flooding our country with illegals, protecting them with sanctuary cities. They are for full-fledged socialism. They're for racial color consciousness rather than blindness, rejecting and spitting all over Martin Luther King's legacy of judging people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. They're authoritarian. There is no way we can place this idea of civility above the idea of opposing what they want to do and promoting what we want to do. They want to fundamentally transform America into a vision that our framers would have abhorred and wouldn't have recognized. I think a lack of civility is an acceptable price to pay for standing up for America, because if you allow these people to return to office, they will obliterate America as founded, and we will lose our liberty and prosperity. The writing is on the wall. We have to resist what they're doing and promote what we know is the correct thing to do for our kids.
David, what would you say, and this is my final question before we go, I hear from people all the time. I was just in New York, and a friend of mine who's really left of center, she said, you know, my upsetment is you have a president that has degraded the national character. What would you respond to that? Through his tweets, through his pronouncements, through his, counterpunching against political enemies?
I would say the pox on their house. They are the ones who call him a Nazi. They call him an idiot. They denigrate him every day. Trump is a counterpuncher. He doesn't start these fights. He's defending himself. The left has been doing that to conservatives, calling us racist. There is not a greater slander you can level against a person. They've been doing that against the entirety of the conservative movement and Republicans, and they want to talk to us about decency. I don't care about creased pants. I don't care about this politeness. If you're going to put politeness above what is decent in this country in terms of the values, they are killing babies in the womb, and you want to talk to me about Trump's tweets? I'm sorry, it just doesn't hold water for me. Yeah, he can be a little unorthodox, but I think unusual times call for extraordinary countermeasures.
David Limbaugh, thank you for being here. The book, Guilty by Reason of Insanity, is available at bookstores everywhere and online from Regnery. Thanks, David.